Sorry, not even that. I think it took me 5 to get here.
Really?
Yeah, because I think I left when I looked at the clock. It was like 58, and then when we were sitting down before, I was like, "Man, it's only 6:15." Like, I
Jeez.
feel like I've been here for an hour already.
Well, I appreciate you coming in, man. Thank you absolutely so much.
Yep.
It's been a while. Been working with each other or known of each other for the last couple of years, and we're able to get a little sit-in interview. First in-person interview ever.
I'm in the barn.
So I
This
appreciate
place is legit. I'm gonna have to take a photo and like tweet it out so that everybody knows what this looks like.
it. Hey, let's go.
Because
First people.
the setup here is there's like it's like one of I'll bet you I haven't been to Meow Wolf yet, but if you've ever been to a Meow Wolf, I've seen pictures of it. There's probably like so many like small details and things that you can't see or that you don't like unless you like scan. Like that's what I walk in here and I'm like, oh look, there's the oh look there. It's like I just keep going. You know, obviously I see things like pimping bombs and bringing rain and live on air and Twitch streams and computer monitors and yeah. Then your dog almost kills me as I walk in and now he's my now he's my best friend. So, right, yes, right, Strider.
Can't see him on the stream right
No,
now.
but
Strider cam,
he's
but
guarding
right
my
there.
feet right now, just making sure that nobody comes in. But yeah, there's just it's a cool place. So you've got a nice atmosphere. It's very Joe Rogan-ish,
Hey,
except that we're in a garage.
soon.
Sorry, a barn.
Soon we will be. I'll try and.
You're gonna have to like take pictures and replicate this wherever you go.
I'll see if I can do a little bit better, and I'll see if I can get to the point where my next studio. We'll see if everyone gets super upset. Do you remember when he first came out and had like the red lighted podcast?
Yeah.
Whatever, and everyone lost their mind. Next setup, we'll see if I'm popular enough to get enough of an uproar.
You need a Jamie though.
So I do another podcast called Bottom of the Order, and I've got now 3 of my old college buddies. They care all about the stats, all about
Right.
the minor league, top 100 pro. I could care less about that.
Sure.
And so when we'd be like at college parties and stuff like that, and they're literally in the corner like
Yeah,
fighting
they're
about that
stat
stuff.
nerds going out, coming through Baseball Reference and Baseball Savant and
Exactly.
yeah,
And so for
Brooks
for
Baseball.
the
and
longest time, I was like, you guys need a podcast. Like, just get to a spot where you two are just talking shit to each other.
yeah,
And finally, I started.
yeah. Just take your phone, put it in the middle, hit record, and go.
And they never wanted to do it. Never wanted to do it. And so finally, I was like, hey, I'm wanting to start doing something like this. Let's look to do it. So I actually used to introduce myself in every podcast as your Jamie.
Your Jamie.
Because I would do nothing but
Yeah.
produce, Google stuff,
Right.
and just let them go.
Yeah. Yeah, just chime in whenever they like can't remember something.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly. And so for a while, I mean, if I can get to that level, man, I'm not going to be too
Yeah.
upset.
It'd be awesome if you could have like 12 million subscribers and pull in hundreds of millions of dollars talking baseball, right?
Easy peasy, right?
Yeah.
Not too bad. A little Spotify deal for the people.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Well,
For now, you can find us on all streaming platforms. No exclusivity.
no
yet.
exclusives yet. Someone give me a bag. So, really quick,
I'm gonna leave my water up here on the shelf.
I'll have that off. How convenient is that?
Huh?
A little convenient.
Yeah, the shelf here. It's a little dirty, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah, no, it feels. I mean, I feel like I'm in a.
In a barn.
No, I feel like I'm in a dugout. There's dirt everywhere.
Hey, okay.
So
Can't complain.
maybe
with
we'll
that.
call this the dugout of the barn.
Right over
welcome-
here.
welcome
we got
to-
a little seats.
Listen, I
We can get
can't
a
keep
lineup.
coming up with all these like incredibly detailed and inspirational terms for this place. So at some point, I'm going to have to invoice you for all this.
Hey, you know what? That's a good problem I'll have.
I know, right?
And I'll need to take you up on some.
Yeah.
I absolutely love them.
I'm going to do some product placement here. There we go.
There we go. Throw it right there. And can you read that out when you get a chance? What do those stickers say?
Well, the ones that I'm pointing to?
Yeah,
that's fast performance. That's my business or my area of reference. I thought your phone just farted there
Dude,
for a second.
my phone is just absolutely struggling.
And then Fast Baseball, which is our program that we run. So Fast Performance is the kind of a culmination of a bunch of different things. It started out as Fast Baseball, and then I brought in strength and conditioning side to it. We had a physical therapy side to it. And so it couldn't just be Fast Baseball anymore because we work with athletes from all genres, right? Lacrosse, hockey, football, soccer, you name it, right? And so when I got together with my business partners, when we were trying to figure out what the hell we're doing, I was like, I'm not like married to the name Fast. I'm okay if you guys want to like completely rebrand everything. And the sentiment was, Fast kind of has a following. Like I had an Instagram page with like 2,000 followers. I had, Twitter with, like 1,000 followers or whatever it is. And they're like, we don't have any of that stuff. So let's just keep the Fast brand and then we'll just call it, we were like, well, I'm like Fast Performance. They're like, everybody calls themselves Performance. I'm like, well, what do you want to call it? Trying to think of Fast Sports, Fast something, right? And at the end of the day, Fast Performance was what we went with. So here we are. But yeah, so I run Fast Baseball, which is pitching and hitting. And then Fast Performance, we have our performance group, which does strength and conditioning. We do testing and what do you call it? Metabolic testing for like cyclists and downhill skiers and things like that. And then we also had Fast Recovery, which is currently on pause because our athletic trainer moved to Ohio. So we don't have that area occupied yet, but we do have a massage therapist. We have a sports psychologist. We have a nutritionist. So we kind of like our building is a one-stop shop for athletes. But that was kind of a really cool segue for you to talk about that. Now we're talking baseball.
Bada bing, bada boom, baby.
That's how you do it.
How long ago did you look to start Fast Baseball?
Well, it started, 2013 I retired. I was down in Amarillo, Texas, wondering what the hell I was doing with my life. I had a wife and 2 young boys at home, and my path back to organized baseball was long and arduous and potentially never going to happen. So I had a long conversation with my wife and my agent, and I said, convince me to come home, basically. I think it was the other way around. It was convince me to stay. And at the end of the day, I had already made up my mind. I just wanted to hear it from somebody else. And so I came home. And then I started what was then cleverly known as the Jason Hirsch Pitching Academy, trying to rebound off my pseudo-celebrity playing for the Rockies and being on the 07 World Series team and all the other people I knew in town, all the media figures and whatnot. And so I started teaching over at a place called Legends in central Denver, and I had a 8-foot wide by 60-foot, like almost to the nose length tunnel, and that's where I started teaching baseball the way that I was taught, which was very hands-on, very mechanical, a lot of boom, boom, boom type stuff. We did a lot of like towel drill things and things on chairs and things that I've come to learn over the last 8 years are kind of counterproductive to what we know now. I had this like epiphany when I was probably earlier this year, late last year, when we kind of decided that we didn't want to do private pitching lessons for anybody under the age of 13, mainly because we want our kids to just enjoy the sport, develop a passion for the game. From a pitching standpoint, it's completely different in my mind. And again, if you're a hitting guy, I'm not. I know nothing about it other than bunting, which you should never do. And, but yeah, you're welcome. But like I think hitting is a lot easier. And it's a lot easier for kids to pick up. I think the mechanics of it are much more simple. There's less moving parts, and I think you can get results pretty quickly. Versus pitching I think is a very complex movement. The way we teach it with all the drills, it can be boring and tedious. Throwing a ball into a wall or into a net, or balancing and doing sets and reps for a 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old. And some kids are going to be exceptions to the rules, but in general, I'm going to lack attention spans. I'm going to struggle with actually improving movement quality or mechanics because kids are growing constantly. And so I would rather those kids just be more athletic. And that's why we run camps versus private sessions. Like I have no problem doing stuff in a camp setting where, I got an hour with your kid. We're going to do a bunch of athletic drills. We're going to teach them an arm care program. And then we're going to go, we gamify a lot of our drills for our young athletes. So meaning that I'll take a drill that might be boring, a hop drill or something like that, and I'll make a game out of it and get these kids to compete against each other, and then they have fun. Like we do something called the castle game, which is I pit 2 teams against each other, and the score starts at 5. It's a tug of war, basically. A score starts at 5, and I put a target down at the end of the tunnel, and then we have one of those 9-hole pitch pockets. And I say, all right, if you hit the target, you get 2 points, 3 points. No, what was it? Let me roll this back here. We put a target with a 9-hole, and then we put a tee in front of that target with a ball on it, right? It's like a yoga ball or foam ball, whatever. All right, if you hit the ball, you get 3 points. If you hit the tee, not including the base, you get 2 points. And if you hit the pitching target behind it, you get 1 point. And if you make it in the red square, great pitch, but no points, right? So the teams compete against one another, and they go back and forth and they have fun with it. And sometimes they're like 3 to this guy, 3 to that guy, 2 to this guy, 2 to that guy, and there's it gets heated, and I could play the game for a half an hour and we'd still be at 5, right? So we have attackers and defenders. The attackers go first. If they hit a 2, right now the score is 3, right? Because attackers are trying to get to 0 and defenders are trying to get to 10, right? So when they move back and forth, I've had kids that are at 1 or at 9, and it gets completely flipped in the same game, and kids are losing their mind. And like, that's what youth baseball should be about. Then as you get older, now you start doing more of the movement quality stuff. Now we start getting into plow care work. Now we start doing things like velocity development and pitch design. And after puberty's hit, now I've got better attention spans. I've got a body that's effectively going to basically resemble itself like that for the rest of your life. You're still going to keep growing, but now we get to impart permanent movement characteristics versus you're an 8-year-old and I just grew 6 inches and now I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground and I can't walk or chew bubble gum, but the mechanical cue that I used at 8 no longer works because my telemetry is completely thrown off. My limbs are longer, my hips are bigger, my body's heavier, whatever it might be. So that's our general philosophy. And so they said we've grown a lot from towel drills and chair work through your research and just being an open-minded coach, which I think a lot of coaches get kind of stuck in the past, is that open-mindedness has led me to go, well, the towel drills were wrong. And I kind of built my business on something that I don't believe in anymore, which is kind of a weird dynamic. But I think that's part of growing as a coach, is admitting when, you used to do something, but you know what, we come to know it's not right anymore, but now I've got something better for you. And so I think that's when we talk about doing stuff fast, we're trying to be on the cutting edge of everything, much like, RBI is, on the cutting edge, not only technology and all this crap, but obviously the way you teach is very quote unquote new school versus somebody who might be old school. And, we can get into that dynamic too if you want, but again, I'm an outsider looking in on the hitting world. I think you guys all talk about the same thing. You guys talk about different parts of it.
100%. And the idea that you kind of, like you said, built your business and kind of cornerstone on some things, and after taking some actual in-depth looks, it seems as if you went from kind of wanting to do, like you said, what you were taught, and then after taking a step backwards, going, that's not the best way for these guys.
Yeah, I think it's only natural to teach the way you were taught, right? Because it's all you know. I mean, as an athlete, obviously I played at a very high level, but, I take things from different coaches and when you're working with a little kid, it's kind of scary, right? Because you're really not sure. There's that like seed of doubt. Like when I first started working with kids, I'm like, are these kids actually going to get better? Like, am I really going to know what I'm talking about? Or am I some kind of freak of nature that some guy gave me a bunch of bullshit and it happened to work on me, right? And I think and the other part is just working with kids in general. You're like, well, it's almost like that Ricky Bobby, like, what do I do with my hands? I'm like, do I give this kid, and obviously we've learned this now, but do I give this kid a bunch of empty coaching cues, or do I like get in there and try and manipulate him, or do I have him go through drills that I used to do? And I think it's only natural for a baseball coach to teach the way you were taught, right? And I think it takes a lot to grow as a coach, to get outside that comfort zone and go into an arena, like a lot like we did with plyo care balls and Rapsodo devices and things like that, where it's way out of my comfort zone, way out of my wheelhouse. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to feel, what it's going to look like. Is it even going to work? Am I going to break somebody? There's that kind of that gray area, that unknown that you've got to kind of wade through.
I heard an amazing quote today, and it was that there are few bridge builders, but everyone will walk on it after it's built.
Sure.
And so
someone's got to pioneer it.
So for you guys to kind of be wanting to take that step, and I think that also kind of goes into the pioneer world and wanting to take a step of, you guys don't do privates for under 13U.
Yeah.
Like that is for a lot of places.
That's money. I know.
If you were to go up to them and bring that up, whoever is the money person or overseeing it, they'll slap you across the face.
I've gotten emails from people. My 6-year-old needs private pitching lessons. I'm like, your 6-year-old just learned how to wipe his ass. He doesn't need a private pitching lesson. He needs to go have fun. The only thing he cares about is who brought the post-game snack, not whether or not he struck out the side or he got a hit or whatever it might be. I think parents heap these unrealistic expectations on their kids that they want them to be a big leaguer at 6, 7, 8 years old. I'm like, no, just go let them have fun. Like, Bryn Smith was the first winning pitcher in Rockies history. And he spoke at one of our Sabre banquets here in Denver. One of the very first, I think it was the first one that I ever went to. And I remember him, one of the things I took away from his speech was, he goes, every year, and this is in California where he lives, he said, every year for our team, our youth team, he goes, we would have a barbecue, a parents-only barbecue. He goes, what I would do is we'd go to the park, and I would take all the baseball equipment, and I'd turn the bag upside down, and I'd shake it and dump it onto the field. And I'd tell all the kids, we're going to have a barbecue for the next 2 hours. I don't want to see any of you over there. And walk away. And basically saying to the kids, organize your own game, figure out the damn rules, and go play and have fun. We're going to go do adult things while you do kid things. Like, give them the freedom to figure stuff out on their own. And I think that, I get from our baseball world that we're in, we don't give kids enough credit. We try and hold their hand and guide them like my 6-year-old's going to be a big leaguer tomorrow, right? If he doesn't get a private pitching lesson, he's never going to make it. I'm like, just let him go be a damn kid. Like, let him figure things out. We don't always have to correct them or guide them. Sometimes the best methods are hands off. And I've done this with my 2 boys. My kids are 11 and 12. And 10 and 12. And so I gave Hudson an extra year there. Anyway, so the only 2 things, I've never given them a private lesson of any sort at any part of their lives. One, because I'm dad and I don't know anything. They won't listen to me, I promise
It's crazy
you.
how that works.
I know, it's weird. I play in the big leagues. You don't know anything. Yeah. But the only 2 things I've ever told them is throw the ball as hard as you can every single time and swing the bat as hard as you can every single time, and good things will happen. And granted, they've had some great coaches over the years that have taught them things, but they're not private pitching lessons. They're in a team setting. And, to my kids' credit, they're both tremendous athletes. They both throw really freaking hard. They both swing the bat really freaking hard. And they're both very successful. They play on tournament teams that I'm not a big tournament team guy, but it's a necessary evil at some levels. And over the years, we just haven't been a slave to tournament ball. And so this year, I'm going to be a little bit more slavish to those types of things. But I've already pre-warned their coaches, like, I ain't doing 16 tournaments. Like, you might get 8 to 10 out of me, if that. And because I don't want to be, they don't want to be there either. But I don't want to be a slave to traveling all over the damn place just so you can play 6 games in a weekend. Like, it's ridiculous to me. But that hands-off approach was really freaking hard. Like, as a parent, to the end of the season, my kid goes, Dad, I'm done with baseball. Like, don't want to look at a glove, don't want to pick up a bat, don't want to watch anything on TV. Whatever sport is in season is what I'm into. So it was football, it was hockey, it was basketball, right? And I'm like, hey, you want to go play catch? No, not interested. And it was hard, really hard. And as the years went on, it got a lot easier for me to go, all right, they're going to go do what they do, right? And at the end of the day, they still love playing baseball, even though we've had our battles. I don't want to go to practice. And I don't want to go to games. I just want to go do that. I don't have time. Shut up. We've made a commitment. You're going to commit to it, right? So, but they've grown to be tremendous athletes. And now this year, for whatever reason, my oldest has just turned 12. At the end of the season, he dropped it into fifth gear. And it has been all baseball all the time. And now we're watching, instead of watching, some YouTuber play video games, I'm watching Dodger highlights or, World Series highlights. He's become a huge Cody Bellinger mark. And I'm like, oh, God. Like, he changed his batting stance in All-Stars to mimic Cody Bellinger and didn't get out until the last game. And now he thinks he's Cody Bellinger. And then this fall he struggled. I'm like, Cody Bellinger's not sustainable, is he? Even Cody Bellinger knows he's not sustainable. And then we're watching the playoffs.
He's just
yeah.
off.
Well, he struggled until the big moments, right? And you get a base hit or you hit a bomb or something like that. I get a text message from my kid and be like, hey, Dad, he's back. I'm like, oh, he's not back. He just got lucky, kid. You have no idea. But anyway, and I love it. I love that he's into it because he watches, and kids are really good at picking up things from watching them, right? Like when he was a little boy, he would watch Todd Helton, Carlos Gonzalez, and he, all of a sudden, his swing looks just like Todd and Cargo. And I'm like, stay there. Don't move. Like, perfect, right? Then he wanted to switch it, so he starts batting like Nolan. I'm like, stay there. Don't move. Like, perfect. And I think, like I said, we don't give kids enough credit. If they watched the game more instead of played the game more, they would actually be a lot better because they would pick up positive movement properties from big league hitters, right? The kids are really good at looking at details and then mimicking them. And a lot of times what they mimic ends up being really good movement patterns. Yeah, it's not like they're watching the local high school game with some kid throwing 60 poo and, some kid's got a really long loopy swing or one kid's chopping wood or whatever it might be, right? They're watching the best of the best and they're trying to emulate the best of the best. And that's how those kids are going to end up being like you and I, right? We watched a lot of games when we were kids. We tried to emulate guys that we played, that we watched, right? I'd love to try and hit like, Barry Bonds or Ken Griffey Jr., even though I'm right-handed, right? Or I want to pitch like Greg Maddux or Randy Johnson or, Pedro Martinez or whatever it might be. Like, I'm going to mimic these things, and kids figure things out on their own. They don't need to be led and directed. They'll eventually find the end, right? They're going to take a little bit longer path, but eventually they're going to get there. And it's really hard as a parent to step back and go, all right, I've got to trust the process, right? Just like what we do in the cage with our kids, trust the process. Same thing from a parenting standpoint.
That's got to be tough, but the idea, and you mentioned it just right there, is that it may take them longer to finish that maze, but I think the fact that if you make them go through the maze themselves, they'll start picking up when they reach a dead end. Mm-hmm. They'll start remembering what it looked like before they got to that dead end. And so then when they're moving forward and they're getting older, now they're going to be able to apply those like, hey, I remember, last year I started doing this, my arm started hurting, or this, or it didn't work out for me, or whatever it may be. The following year, when they start getting closer to that, or they start working towards that same, failure, if they were the ones that realized that they failed, if they're the ones that learned how to make that adjustment, they're going to figure it out. Yeah. Now, one of the cues I've been using in here a lot is if, my guys, if they just were learning how to swim, I'll throw the floaties on, we go to the deep end. But if me as an instructor, I still have to hold you by the butt and have you barely out of the water. Right. You as a kid, you're not going to learn how to swim because I'm always right there.
Throw them in there.
You got to jump in the deep end.
Sink or swim. It's going to happen.
Exactly. And I think so many people don't, like you said, it's scary to allow that to happen. And you said it took time for your boy to kind of come back around and, start asking the questions that you were asking just a few years ago. And from an instructor standpoint, has that helped you allow to kind of understand more on the instruction side of how to work and interact with kids?
And I think that's another hard thing to do as an instructor is to not talk, right? It's I think it's easy for us to give some sort of a critique on every pitch or every swing. Oh, that was great, or oh, that was bad, or yeah, but you just dipped your elbow a little bit, or you just did this. Like, let me just see you do it a couple of times, right? I think one of my favorite cues that I do with kids is, they'll throw a pitch and be like, "How'd that feel?" Right? What did you feel there? Like, I wouldn't tell them whether it was good or bad. I don't want them to know that. I just want to know how they felt, right? And there's that light bulb moment for kids, and it happens a lot, right? Where we've been working on correcting something, and then they go do it bad, and you can see the result almost immediately. And then I look at them and I go, "What'd you feel?" He goes, "We did it wrong, didn't we?" Like, good. Now we're growing, right? Because now if I know what wrong feels like, then I can go back and do what right feels like, and I can do it more often, right? And then that self-correction starts to show up, where now I'm in a game, or maybe I'm training on my own. Like, I'm going back to your example, is we start heading down that path of bad, and you start to go, "Oh yeah, I remember when I was doing good, I was doing this," and all of a sudden we start working our way back. So it's not always a straight line, it's not linear, but it might look more like peaks and valleys, right? As long as we don't reach the bottom, we're doing all right, right? As long as at some point, it's like, we'll use Cody Bellinger because he's terrible, right? But Cody Bellinger realized he was almost at the bottom. I mean, he couldn't have been any lower than batting average, right? But he finally made an adjustment, widened his stance, right? And all of a sudden, by the end of the year, you could see his stock starting to come back up, and you start to see the confidence come back up. And that's the same thing with our kids. Like, it's okay to let them fail, right? You learn more from failure than you do from success. If you were always successful, the first time you'd faced adversity, you would never know what the hell to do. Right? I would much rather my kids strike out 3 games and ask me questions afterwards than to hit 3 bombs and not give 2 reps, right? And for my kid, the fall was a great learning experience for him. He played up. He was only 11. He's 12 now, but he was only 11 when he played, and he's playing against 13-year-olds. And he's like, "Daddy, I can't get a hit," or this, that, and the other. I'm like, "Yeah, dude, but you're not striking out. It's not like these guys are overmatching you. You're mentally, you're beating yourself." He'd get on the mound, he'd strike kids out. I'm like, "Yeah, you're pitch great. You're 11 years old striking out 13-year-olds. Think about that. Like 2 years older than you, 2 years more baseball experience, and you're beating them, right? And you're not even close to being like polished or perfect, but you figured it out throughout the fall how to make those corrections, and you did that by having a really bad fall. Like, that's okay. That's why I put you in this level, and I pushed you, because I don't want you to always be the best kid. Because if you're always the best kid, you're never being challenged, right? I want you to be middle of the pack. I don't want you to be the worst kid on the team. I don't want you to be the best kid on the team. I want you to be right in the middle, and I want you I want to push you, and you need to push yourself to try and be as good as those guys that are better than you. And I think that's how those athletes are going to grow.
It's the idea of, if you're trying to squat, and let's say you're at 315. If everyone else in the class is only at, what was it, 245 or whatever it is, 235, you're probably going to be at like 315 for a while, unless you have just that stupid internal drive and you don't look outwards for any of the comparisons. You're probably going to sit at 315 for a while. Everyone else is going to see you at 315,
right?
And they're going to try and get to your level, but you aren't going to be trying to get anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you reverse that, if you're the only one doing 315 and everyone else is doing 405,
right?
Oh, I bet your ass you're going to do everything you humanly can.
It's hard. It's hard when you're at the top, because you got nobody to compare yourself to other than, I mean, obviously in the professional level, you got to compare yourself to the greats, right? But when you are the great of your generation, what motivates you? What pushes you, to, kick those lower level guys down and be like, "Listen, dude, I'm the GOAT. Like, there's a reason why I'm up here." And so that's where, finding some self-motivation and constantly learning, I think, as an athlete and even as a coach, that helps us grow. Like, a guy like Tom Brady doesn't stick around the league as long as he have and win as many rings as he have because he was content, right? He's not content, but every year he's trying to get better, right? Randy Johnson and I had a conversation one year. The only conversation I had with him, there's a big old black cricket. And it was just in passing in the weight. I always heard Randy Johnson was an asshole, right? And his, I guess his legend on the mound, which kind of exuded that term. And I faced off against him. This was his second go around with Arizona. We were at home here in Colorado, and I threw 8 innings. I gave up a 3-run bomb to Connor Jackson on a hanging changeup, and I lost 3-0. He went 5 and dive and got the W. So the next day in the weight room, I walk in there and I'm starting to get my lift on, and he's already in there lifting, and just in passing, say, "Hey, Randy, great job last night." And an hour later, we got done with our conversation. And when I got done, one of the key points from that conversation was that he told me at the end of the year, look at your stats and figure out where's your weakness. What is something that I can work on this off season that I can add effectively to my toolbox, right? And every year, if you're trying to add new tools to your toolbox, you get to keep growing and you get to continue to remain dominant. He goes, for me, 1 year was even just learning how to hit better. So I spent the whole off season just learning how to hit. And I'm like, I mean, that's pretty humbling as a pitcher, right? To know, like, well, I pretty much dominate everything I do on the mound. I mean, when you strike out 300 dudes and win Cy Youngs, what more is there, right? But, for him, he went out of his way to give me that nugget of knowledge that, it might seem cliche coming from a guy like you or me, like, we're not in the league or, we're just working with kids. But, when it comes from like one of the greatest of all time, it just gives you affirmation that, hey, the things we're doing here are the right things, right? And now we've just got to find how do we communicate that to our athletes.
I wonder what offseason he worked on dotting birds. You think he went to Kansas?
I think he just worked on accuracy. It was just so good. It was impeccable. That mid-throw, he's like, "Oh, there's a bird. Got it."
That was just unreal. And the fact that that's,
It happened again not that long ago. You might have to look it up on the internet.
Really?
I think it may have been in the fall league that some kid throwing a ball, he dotted a bird mid-flight.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna have to pull that up. You had mentioned the idea of coaches needing to kind of ask, how can I get better? Mm-hmm. But then also pushing your kid into a little bit more of that uncomfortable failure aspect. Mm-hmm. When you're going through your training and the stuff that you guys do, how do you guys incorporate failure into your training? What does that look like? And how do you guys kind of manage that with a new person that you're working with?
So I don't actively try and program in failure. I think failure is just part of training. We see it more often than not during velocity phases. We see a lot of failure, and we see a lot of dejected players and athletes. So the way our program typically, we periodize how we work with our athletes. So that first month of training, if let's just say, you came to me, now it's middle of November, late November. You said, "All right, coach, I haven't thrown a ball in a month." I said, "All right, so for the first month of training, all we're going to do is build your arm strength. We're going to work on some correctives for whatever issues you might have." So we start all of our lessons with a movement screen, biomechanics report, and just a baseline mechanics evaluation. We just look for low-hanging fruit, right? Maybe it's a late arm inverted W type situation. Maybe you've got some forearm fly out. Maybe your stride's too short, not long enough. Maybe you fly open, whatever it might be, right? Any multitude of different things. And so we work on some corrective drills while we're breaking your arm back in and building that work capacity and that volume. So that first month, what we might want to call failure in that first month is patience, right? Is going, all right, like I understand what we have to do in order to get to the fun stuff. And this is where, like I said, we do a lot of driveline stuff, driveline protocols, and I think this is where people get off the rails on driveline, is that they think, well, I'm just going to skip right to pull downs and plyovila without doing any kind of building, strengthening, anything. And then they break, and then they blame the driveline protocols, and they say, well, driveline broke me. Like, I can almost guarantee you driveline didn't break you, but you broke yourself by being a moron. So what most people don't see is that 4 to 6 weeks of buildup that most athletes are in the gym, 3-4 days a week, going through boring drills and throwing and just building work capacity and arm strength so that when they do get to that velocity phase, they can do it without failing right away or breaking. And so that patience in that first month, I think for some athletes is really difficult because it's like, when the hell am I going to actually like do the fun? When do I get to build velocity? When do I get to do this, that, and the other? And I'm sitting there just programming out hybrid A and hybrid B days, and they're like, Coach, we get to the board, we talked about boredom earlier. A lot of kids are in that phase. And then once they reach 4 to 6 weeks of on-ramping, then we switch into velo, and all of a sudden I see their interest go, right? And now hey, it's velo day, right? And we start our velo guys off really slow. We don't do the full boat right away. We typically only do overload, underload, one overload, one underload, and a regular ball. Because most guys won't be able to get through. And it seems so benign because it's like 12 throws, but they can't make 12 max effort throws, right? So we build them up to get to that point. And so the failure in velocity is what we were kind of talking and alluded to earlier, was that linear growth, right? Everybody thinks velocity development is linear growth, right? It's just every day I come in, I'm going to throw harder and harder and harder and harder. And at the end of the day, it looks more like a roller coaster. There's peaks and valleys in that roller coaster, but progressively it works in an upward trend. And so I had this discussion. We had 10 guys in last Friday, and some of them did really well. Most of them didn't. And so I had to have the discussion with them because you could see, mopey, frumpy shoulders and kicking the dirt and throwing their gloves and being really disappointed with themselves. And I said, guys, we can celebrate the peaks, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? And you absolutely should celebrate the peaks. But when we get into these valleys, the goal should not be to wallow in misery. The goal down there is to just realize, like, I just need to be as good as I can be today. That may not be, let's just say a kid threw 90 last time, and now he wants to throw 91, but he only got to 86, right? It's not going to be 91 every day. It's going to be 86 today, right? And your body goes, screw you, Connor. It's 86, whether you like it or not, that's all you're getting, right? And then you go, screw you, body, it's 86.1 today, right? It's 0.1 better, right? And that's where that growth is. And so, when we look at growth in velocity and just in general in player development, typically there's that skyrocket right in the beginning because now I've introduced your body to a brand new stimulus, right? And it works the same way in weightlifting. I'm sure you see it a lot in hitting as well, where it's like, boom, right? Exit velo went through the roof. I gained 10 miles an hour in the last 2 weeks, right? Or, with pull downs, hey, I gained 5 miles an hour in the last 2 weeks. Beautiful, right? And then there's this plateau. And then there's this regression, right? And that's where it starts playing mind games with guys because they're like, what am I doing? Why am I getting worse? Why can't I? Like, some guys are 5, 6, 7, 8 miles an hour lower than the first day they did it. I said, just be patient because right when you think it's over, boom, the rocket ship goes again, right? Because in that phase, your body is going through this adaptation where even though you're not throwing as hard as you can, you're building strength, you're recruiting new muscle fiber, and it takes time. Our bodies are not cell phones. It's not instantaneous results, right? It takes a minimum of 8 weeks in the gym to start to see any noticeable difference. It's no different than when we're swinging or throwing or doing any other movement mechanic. It takes time for those things to become permanent. And as long as you're patient, they'll show up eventually, but you got to be patient enough because some people might get to week 10, right, or week 6 or 7, they're like, man, I'm giving up, and they don't realize that in week 8 they're about ready to make a breakthrough, right? And so you've got to be patient. That's where failure needs to become a motivation, but you also need to have an understanding of why you're failing and how to take advantage of that fail. Right? And in that moment, like I said, all I want to do is be 0.1 better that night. I don't need to be PR better. I just need to be 0.1 better.
From an instructor standpoint, you said that the ramp up period for someone that you're working with, and we could use an example of one of my guys, Mr. Spencer Spina, that has come into the Fast Baseball Academy. One of my guys just recently started. How, from an instructor standpoint, do you kind of get through to that player like, hey, I know this is boring, I know this, sucks. What do you guys have that conversation? Do you lay out stuff? Like, is it different from player to player? How do you gain that trust of the player that's like, hey, with me for the long haul,
Yeah.
this is going to pan out?
Yeah, I think it's tough because you don't want to like use comparative things, right? I don't want to say like, well, I had this other guy, Connor, and he came in, he looked just like you, and he gained 5 miles an hour and whatever, because the business we work in, there shouldn't be any guarantees ever, because bodies grow and develop at different rates, and so messaging and programming is going to be different for each kid. I think where we start to develop trust with our athletes is in our initial assessment. When we're sitting them down after we've gone through our movement screen, after we've done the biomechanics, after we've gotten through Rapsodo numbers, and we've explained what we see. I think we start to build trust with our athletes and their parents through knowledge, right? And being able to explain what they're looking at and why those things are important, right? If I said, all right, let's take Spencer, and Spencer works with Cole, so I don't.
Tim? Do you work with Tim?
Tim Wolf, yeah. No, I don't, but that's Nick.
Oh, that's right, that's Nick.
Yeah.
Gosh,
So I'm full. You can keep sending guys our way, but my calendar is jam-packed. But like I said, let's just say Tim was in an inverted W, right? And I'm sitting down with Tim and Tim's dad, and I say, here's why an inverted W is bad, right? And I can give you plenty of examples of guys that blew out that had inverted Ws. I can show you pictures of Steven Strasberg and Mark Pryor, and I can show you research, and we can give you, more data to back up what we're telling you. I think the important part when you're talking to an athlete is you need to know what you're talking about, and you need them to understand that you know what you're talking about. Because again, we need to give athletes more credit than we currently give them. They're already on the internet, they're on social media, they're watching games, they're already exploring all these different things, and they just may not know what they are, or why to do them, or what order to do certain things in. So when you come to an athlete and you say, well, you've got an inverted W, right? That word, boom. All right, I know what an inverted W is. Now I explain why an inverted W is bad, and they go, huh, never knew that, right? And you start to build a trust level with them where they go, all right, maybe he does know what he's talking about. And then we get into, here's some of the mechanical things we want to work on to fix that. And I show you drills on how to do that, and you start getting them to buy into it. And so anytime you give them a new stimulus, it's fresh, it's fun. It's like giving Strider a ball, and he's like, oh boy, like, oh, it's a new toy, right? And eventually that toy rolls into the corner and he forgets about it, right? And that might happen,
Every day.
it might happen in 2 weeks. Yeah, sorry. Oh, puppy
It
dog.
happens consistently, doesn't it? Bud?
Yeah. You just got to give me more bones. But like for a new athlete, so we have a period in our program, we just call it an on-ramp. It's 2 weeks. And all we're going to do for 2 weeks is I'm going to force you to memorize our arm care and warm-up program and just get acclimated to the drills and make sure you're doing them right. Right? And at the end of 2 weeks, we're going to go into more individual work, where now we're actually going to put those drills into practice. We're going to have you start throwing them harder. We're going to start building throwing volume, and then we're going to start getting into more of the mechanical things and start to build off of that. So we try and keep it fresh, so that we're adding pieces in there where it's a new toy, and all of a sudden, you look at a kid and you do something, you're like, oh man, that was awesome. Then you take video, right? And I think, again, this is a generation that's very visual. They need to see things in order to believe them. It's not like, I'm not even going to say my generation or even your generation, because I'm very visual, and I'm sure you are. Well, you're surrounded by computer screens and phones. You're very visual as well, right? But it's not like our father's generations where, somebody could tell me something and all of a sudden that means something to me, right? Like I don't, our generation goes, I don't believe you. Show me, right? And this generation's no different, right? Now they want to see it. Now they want to show me, but in high def. You know what I mean? Like, all right, okay. So that's where taking video to show guys kind of before and after gets their juices flowing and goes, ooh, right? And then they start feeling better, and then they start seeing results. And that's when you start to get buy-in with the athletes and start getting them interested in the training part of it. And usually by the time that ends, now we're getting into velo. And now it's like, all right, I'm taking all these new mechanics, now I'm going to throw hard, right? And then again, we go into that roller coaster cycle before we move into, mound velo or pitch design. And usually by the time we get to pitch design, which is my favorite part of the process, because that gets my juices going, where I can take a kid who's got a shitty curveball and I can make it a good curveball, and I can watch the glow on his face as soon as that kid goes, oh boy, I've got a loaded weapon and I know how to use it, right? And then they start going out there and punching tickets, and then I get text messages, dude, punched out 8 guys today. I'm like, you're damn right you punched out 8 guys, right? Like, you get them a new toy, but I always tell them, this is one of my favorite sayings as an instructor is I give kids I tell them, you have the Spider-Man conundrum. With great power comes great responsibility. So, when we talk about throwing certain pitches, whether it's a younger athlete, we're talking about curveballs, right? Or an older athlete with some kind of an off-speed pitch that he's really proud of, or even a fastball for that matter. I'm like, listen, dude, we don't need to go out there and, show the first batter, your best stuff. Like, pump the brakes, with younger kids. I'm like, it's 1 to 2 curveballs an inning. It's not 1 to 2 curveballs the batter. Like, we still have things that we need to work on. It's not just that one piece of the puzzle. So, but yeah, that's where, not necessarily building in failure, but making them understand as we go along and keeping them interested by adding new pieces as we go.
The piece that you said, getting that on that trust level, one of my absolute favorite things to do is I have about 6 different kind of categories I have for different types of hitters, especially at the amateur level.
Mm-hmm.
And when guys come in, I kind of have preset drills for each type. I don't tell them anything really on the first lesson, but after seeing them swing and once I put them in the category in my head, I love just to ask, like, hey, does this sound like you? Do you happen to do blank?
Right.
Does this seem kind of, do you do blank?
It turns into an infomercial.
And then they're just kind of looking at me like, how do you know? Like, what are you talking?
Right.
Yeah, I do that. And it's like, yeah. And so getting that idea and being able to gain that trust really early is really special. And then
I thought you were going to say you jump in there and just start hitting nukes, and Hit Tracks goes, yeah, it was 108. And it's like kids are like, hey, coach, how hard do you throw now? I'm like, you throw harder than me. That's how hard you throw.
Exactly.
That's how hard we're at. That's, back in the day, when I was getting into the driveline stuff, right, one of my things was, well, if I don't know what it feels like, the kid will never know what it feels like. So I put myself through the program, and I was having a blast doing it. And that was the last time I threw a ball competitively, pulling down at, in the 90s or whatever, and, like, that was fun. And I watch kids do it now, and I'm like, fuck, I should get in there and do it with them. And then I realized that I'm 39 years old, and I'm probably going to break. And I won't be able to wipe my ass in the morning if I did anything remotely close to what they're attempting. So I got to build trust other ways instead of just demonstrations.
You had mentioned some talking about new toys, bringing in, introducing to some new things. Is Fast Baseball getting any new toys here recently or anything like that?
Yeah, we are getting some new toys.
Oh, what are you guys getting?
How convenient. We've always been on the cutting edge of toys, right? We've owned a Rapsodo for, I think we're going on our 5th year now.
Oh, wow.
We were very early adopter. I think we had the first unit in the state. I saw them, I didn't actually see them at ABCA, but I saw them starting to grow through Driveline. And then when Driveline did their comparative analysis between TrackMan and Rapsodo and basically fell within the margin of error, I looked at the price of the Rapsodo and I said, I can't afford 20 grand, but I can afford 3 grand. And that's how much they were at the time. They've come up significantly. But either way, the very first Rapsodo you had used to sit on a tripod behind the catcher. I broke 3 of them. Sound like mariachis, like shaking them around. But they were really good with us. So like I said, I've always tried to bring that type of stuff to our athletes. Because again, anything I can give them visually and help them explain certain things and so that they can see it, we've been all about that. So, when Rapsodo came out, the Insight camera at ABCA a couple of years ago, I bought one, right? Because I'm like, I can't afford an edger, right? That's like 8 grand. But in Insight, 3 grand or 3,500, whatever it was. Like, I can afford that. So we got an Insight. And then we started showing guys what 850 frames per second looks like when your fingers are coming off a ball and people's brains are going, right? They're like, oh my God, what is this thing, right? But just giving them more detail, more data, more insight has always been our goal, right? And then we started doing the pitch AI stuff, and I'm not a biomechanist by any means. I look at a pitch AI report and I go, here's the important things, right? There's a whole bunch of large bars and graphs and things like that, but here are the ones that mean the most. So we've got a baseline of knowledge there. But, with my new instructor coming in and, everybody in town's got a Rapsodo, it's not that I don't love my Rapsodo, because I think, it's one, for any piece of technology, whether you're using HitTrax or Rapsodo or Blast or, any of those other pieces, it's one thing to say you have it. It's another thing to know how to use it. And then on top of that, there's another thing to know how to relay that information in a format that is understandable for your athletes. So I think there's facilities in town that bought certain things, whether it's driveline balls or Rapsodo devices, because other facilities in town had them and were using them, and their athletes were probably like, hey, why don't you have these things? Like, I train here and these are what we do. How come I don't have that access here? And so they said, well, we've got deep pockets. Why don't we just go get one? So they went and got one. And then they got everybody excited and go, sweet, we've got a Rapsodo. And then I'll talk to a certain athlete and I'll be like, hey, when was the last time you threw a bullpen? I'm like, oh, I threw over at this place and throwing Rapsodo there. I was like, oh, did somebody watch you? Like, no, they just set it up for me. I was like, okay. And did anybody tell you about the data that you were collecting or what it looked like? Like, no, I was just on my own. I'm like, well, again, it's one thing to have a piece of technology, it's another thing to know how to use it and then relay it to your athletes. So, long roundabout way, we are upgrading from Rapsodo to TrackMan.
Ooh,
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah, we took a leap of faith. It's a huge leap of faith for us because it's a huge investment for us. But the TrackMan device, one, it's just as portable as Rapsodo is. Fits in a backpack with a tripod. The data is a little bit cleaner and more accurate. I think from a major league level and even a collegiate standpoint, I think the data is more widely accepted as being more accurate. There's some things that Rapsodo does, the way they measure, I believe it's horizontal break, the way it's inferred versus TrackMan, which is actually measured. So you're talking about a optical device like Rapsodo versus a radar-based device, which is what TrackMan is. So one of the limitations with Rapsodo is once the ball passes the unit, it doesn't know what happened between that 14 and a half feet and home and the catcher's glove, right? What it does is it creates a predictive model, much like your brain does as a hitter when I'm throwing a baseball, right? At, I believe it's 28 feet, your brain has already calculated everything that it possibly can before you react, right? So you're intaking, where the pitch is, what the velocity looks like, what maybe the spin looks like. And then your brain goes, all right, based off this information, I'm predicting that ball is going to be here, right? And so that's what Rapsodo is doing. It's just predicting the ball is going to be here versus TrackMan, which goes, I'm not going to predict it. I'm just going to tell you where it went, right? I'm going to show you where it went. And there were some limitations on both devices, and I think they both have their pluses and minuses. But I think from an accuracy standpoint, the TrackMan would be better. And the data, I can just print out a TrackMan report and send it to any college I want, and they'll go, I know exactly what this is, right? Or I can give it to a pro team and be like, hey, here's TrackMan data. And they go, oh, yeah, we read that all the time. So I think there's going to be a learning curve for us on it as well. Like there's some new things on there, like learning about inferred spin versus actual spin. But there's some cool possibilities there. And the other part is we'll be the only privately owned TrackMan in the state. So I like being the trendsetter. It'd be really interesting, and you and I know who we're talking about here. It'd be really interesting to see if any facilities in town get one after we get one. Because as of right now, I said, outside of PBR uses one for their showcases, but that's the only place you can get TrackMan data is going to a showcase. Now you'll be able to come to Fast Performance and get a pitching evaluation and get actual TrackMan data the same that you would at a showcase.
So let me I kind of wanted to just do a little full circle. When you walk into Fast, and I'm saying it just as Fast for the moment for this reason, when you walk into Fast, you're going to have a massage therapist. You're going to have people that can work with you for strength.
Mm-hmm.
You have people that's going to work with you on hitting. There's going to be people working on you for throwing, strength, and mobility. And then you're also going to have someone there to help with pitch design.
Yeah.
What are you guys missing?
Athletic training was a huge part of one of the reasons that it's in my vision for our facility when I first started, because when I was at Legends, I had our strength guy was up at Big Bear Ice Arena. And so I would send my guys to Big Bear Ice Arena to lift. And I'm like, God, it'd be awesome if they were just like here. I get done throwing, like, hey, go see Joel and go lift. How awesome would that be? So then we had the opportunity where my lease was coming to an end. Joel's lease was coming to an end. And he goes, hey, dude, you like want to move into the same building together? And I'm like, hell yeah. So then we started looking for a place, and we ended up moving into a place out east with another business partner who ended up, he should be in an orange jumpsuit, but that's for a whole nother podcast. And it didn't work out, right? It didn't work out at all. And because we weren't really calling the shots, and he wasn't calling very good shots. So, we ended that relationship. We got out of there. Thank God we didn't, lose anything necessarily outside of a beautiful building, 30,000 square feet.
Oh.
Did you ever go?
I never was able to stop by the first one.
Yeah, it was 30. It's 3 times bigger than the one we're in now. We had problems filling space, which we don't have at the current spot, which I like. I like smaller and more manageable, right? It's a good thing if I've got to shoehorn people in, right? That means at least we're making the most of it.
Fit in like a little side corner or Sunday morning.
Yeah, or just like I do all of our scheduling, and so I look at my schedule. I'm like, holy crap! Like, I've got all these teams on the board, and then I'm like, where am I going to give my individual lessons at now? Like, where does that fit? And then I look at the weekends, and I go, all right, I guess we got to bite the bullet for the weekend. So, yeah, eventually it's going to be 7 days a week, which is, as long as we're making some money and having fun and kids are getting better, we're okay with that. But, sorry, where were we going with that? No, where were we going with that? I forgot.
You were talking about the old building.
Yeah.
With Fast and stuff like that.
Oh, like what other pieces do we need, right? So, again, that was my vision, was to have everything all in one spot, right? When I played here as a Rocky, I would go throw somewhere. I went somewhere different for PT, and I lifted somewhere different. Right? I spent all day driving around town just so I could get these things in. I'm like, how cool would that be if I spent 2 hours at the facility, I got my PT done, I got my throwing done, my hitting done, and I got to go home, right? And that's 2 hours later. Instead of, well, mom had to drive me here, and dad had to drive me there, and it's a 7-day process to do what you could potentially do in 2 or 3 days. So that was the whole goal. Everything's under one roof. And so we got that ability to do it at this facility. Unfortunately, I think I mentioned it earlier, our athletic trainer moved to Ohio. So we've been missing that component to it. But the light at the end of the tunnel, we had a great meeting with another group up north out of Fort Collins that might be potentially coming down and occupying that space. And they have very similar thought processes on player development like that you and I have in terms of being more new school, kind of open-minded approaches to things. These guys, from a medical standpoint, they want to do all non-surgical intervention on stuff. And they've had incredible results. And they use really cool pieces of technology that come out of other countries that people in the United States are not either open-minded enough to, or maybe they're not quote-unquote approved for clinical use at more official type places. These guys are using it, and they're using it very effectively. And so we had great conversations with them, and I think, philosophically, we are all on the same page. It just comes down to, is it fit? How much is it going to cost? What's the interaction between all of our companies going to eventually look like? Because ideally for me, if I've got a kid on the floor, he goes, oh man, I think my rib hurts or something like that, or my shoulder's sore. I can go, all right, Connor, go see the trainer, right? And they'll be able to take a look at you, and then they say, all right, based off what we see, oh, you got a strained lat. Like, we're going to sell you a package of 10 therapy sessions doing this device, whatever, for an hour. We're going to put throwing on hold. Like that kind of interaction it makes our facility more professional, right? Because now I'm treating a high school athlete or a youth athlete or college athlete. Now I'm treating you like a professional would be, right? If I was with the Rockies and I'm throwing a bullpen and I strain my lat, what is he going to tell me to do? Hey, go see the trainer, right? What's the trainer going to tell me? Like, hey, you're going to skip throwing for the next week and a half and we're going to do PT, right? And so what do? I do PT for 2 weeks and then I get into a return to throwing program and then I'm back into the program, right? That interaction at the facility level needs to happen and it needs to be more frequent. You can't just be a monotone, way of thinking from a player development standpoint. That's why we do player development. I don't run teams, I develop athletes. And developing athletes includes strength and conditioning, it includes physical therapy if need be, it includes mental training, it includes nutrition, it includes all of those things. That's what player development is.
That's special, man. That's special.
There needs to be more thought like that, right? We need to get out of that single lane thought process of, well, we're just going to play more games and play more tournaments. You're going to get exposure and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, yeah, but there's way more that goes into it if you want to play at the next level. If you don't, that's fine. Go play tournaments. Go knock yourself out, right? I'm sure you've seen my posts on our local Facebook network group, and people just drive me batshit crazy because I'm like, obviously I played 10 years of professional baseball. I don't know shit, which is fine. If you don't believe that, knock yourself out, right? You know better than me for your kid, and I don't disagree. You're the kid's parent, right? But you got to be a little bit more open-minded to the fact that maybe little Johnny doesn't need to be playing 90 games over the course of the summer and the fall. Maybe he only needs to play 60 games, or maybe he needs to do more development work, or maybe you just need to let him go be a kid. One of those is going to be a better choice than 90 games. I don't care if he keeps asking for it or not, because eventually little Johnny's going to break. And then you're going to have real big problems if little Johnny can't play and he really wants to play, right? Especially if little Johnny wants to go on to the next level. So, but he broke because not necessarily a fault of anybody else's, but the sheer fact that you overloaded him, you continually broke him down without ever building him back up. That's why there are certain safety measures in place, right? There's red flags all over the joint. But if you continue to ignore those things, something catastrophic can happen. And I think that's what we all need to be aware of, not only as instructors, you and I, we know that, right? But parents, parents that don't know any better need to be aware of what those red flags are.
And it's one of those things where I struggle trying to understand sometimes. Like, I'll meet with a parent or whatever it is, working with a new kid. It seems like I know what you guys do. I look to do the same, where we're able to kind of put a plan together from one of the beginnings and stuff like that. And sometimes I feel like when I'm kind of walking these parents through the plan, it almost feels like there's doubt of what I'm doing, and it's not doubt that I don't know what I'm doing. It's doubt that I don't know their kid,
right,
or something like that. And it's like, well, Timmy doesn't like to do those things, or when I get told
the best is when I get the parent of a 9-year-old. It's like, hey, little Johnny wants a private pitching lesson. He needs a private pitching lesson. I'm like, well, here's why I don't do them. Well, he's the the number 1 ranked 9-year-old in the state. I'm like, oh, really? Like, go tell it to somebody who actually gives a shit, because I don't. And I've had parents that have gone that route, and I'm like, well, then why do you need my help if he's the number 1? Like, what are you trying to tell me? Like, that your kid's better than I am? Like, I don't care.
And number 1, in which state? There's
Yeah.
so many state titles. There's so many different leagues.
Right. There's so many different organizations.
Because when we did just have one state title, you had a lot of people that lost,
yep,
and a lot of people that didn't win. So then they made a second division,
right,
and then now
you have double A, triple A, majors. You have gold, platinum, silver, diamond. Yeah, it's all part of the racket, right? That, that's why these tournament organizations make money hand over fist. And, when you're getting $600, $700, $800 a team, and you're guaranteeing 3 games, and you can admit any number of teams and say, all right, we got 40 teams. All I got to do is get 3 games apiece, and we're solid, right? And so I just made, I made $25,000 over the weekend, right? And maybe it cost me $5 to put the whole thing on, right? Because these teams all want to do this, right? I get it. I'm not faulting those organizations for doing that. But at the same point, I'm like, you're also contributing to a huge problem, right? In that we've got kids that play way too much and don't practice nearly enough.
Do you think the reason that kids are playing so much, one, I think there's just so many damn teams. I think there's been too many people that have been told no, and instead of learning why they were told no, they just went to somebody else.
Right.
And now either their dad or their mom or whoever, their uncle, but now they've made a new team. And now you have another team and another team and another team. And no one is, like you said, developing. No one is getting better because they're not being put in a position where they're forced to.
Right.
Why do you think, what do you think is the pressure for so many games? Is it the coaches? Is it high school coaches? Is
I think
it
it's
parents?
I think it's money and expectations, right? Like, as a parent, if I'm going to pay, let's just say, $3,000 for my kid to play on a team, I have expectations that my kid's supposed to play a certain number of innings, get a certain number of at bats. We're supposed to play a number of games, right? Like, I want to get my money's worth. And so I think in pursuit of getting your worth, coaches have just said, hey, why don't I just, we're going to play 16 tournaments. Like, the summer's 16 weeks long. We're going to play a tournament every weekend. And that's how we're going to get better. I think part of it is ignorant parents, right? They don't know any better. Or parents that are overzealous that just get so into the moment where they're like, oh yeah, they don't understand volume and how kids break down and things like that. And it's maybe ignorance is the wrong word, but I feel like there's an ignorance there, and there's a lack of direction from professionals like you and I, and even Major League Baseball. And listen, MLB did a great job with Pitch Smart in getting that into Little League and getting it into Cal Ripken leagues, but there really hasn't been a follow through on it, right? Like, I feel like they said, hey, we developed this thing, here's a bunch of paperwork, and go ahead and just distribute it, right? They didn't go deeper on it. And I think there's a level of education for parents and coaches that they just need to understand these things, right? Where, what's important, what's not important, are more games important or is more practice important? I think there needs to be an education piece in there where you go to a coach, and some coaches are really good about it and other coaches are really bad at it. I mean, you've seen, I'm sure your guys have played for terrible coaches, right? How many times have you seen a video where coaches are fighting each other, right? Or parents are getting tossed out of games and, brawling in the stands or whatever it means. I'm like, what is this? Like, we're talking about youth baseball. Like, does it need to be like this? No, right? And that's where I said there's a disconnect, right, between overzealous coaches and parents and professionals and direction from that level where they go, yeah, that's really just not healthy. It's not good mentally, physically. You guys, and there's plenty of examples in the world, right? You look at Dominican kids, they practice 5 times more than they'll ever play, right? But they come off the island at 5'10" and a $135 chucking 97 two-seamers with filthy life to them, and you go, well, how the hell does that happen, right? Well, little Billy, while Pedro was practicing, all the way up till he was 16 years old, and now he throws 97. Billy was playing 90 games a summer, and you running out of juice or something?
No, I'm just very annoyed with the 15 different things that are sending off alerts.
You're fine. But you know what I mean? Like I said, we've placed too much importance on games and not nearly enough importance on player development or practice or skill acquisition, which is really, at the end of the day, when you look at what Major League Baseball is demanding of our athletes these days, skill acquisition is by far the most important piece. They don't give 2 rips you played 90 games as a 12-year-old, right? They just want to see that you throw 95, right? Or you throw 95 to the backstop, but you still throw 95. We'll teach you how to control it, right? Like, those are important. Whether you like it or not, that's the way Major League Baseball operates. Yes. Do they want polish? Yes. Do they want guys that can locate? Yes. But do they want power first and foremost? Yes. Right? They want dudes who hit 9,000-foot home runs, and they want dudes who throw piss missiles to home plate at 100 miles an hour with 12 inches of lateral break. Like, it's just, it's the way of the world, right? And don't be mad that little Billy didn't get a chance to go play Division I baseball because he throws 75 because he played 90 games as a 12-year-old, right? And never really developed the skills necessary, right? And skills, not just baseball skills, right? You have, there's a cricket on my knee. Get that on video?
Yes, it is.
Here he
Jimmy,
goes.
what you doing,
3,
bro?
2, 1. Oh, oh,
Oh,
did you hear that ping off your leg? He's all right.
he's out with a concussion.
How the hell did he get up on my All right, anyway.
That's NFL protocol.
I was, yeah. Which eyes is it? But you know what I mean? Like they said, you spend so much time playing games, you forgot to develop or acquire the skills necessary to play that game at the next level. And you can't be mad at the game, right? You can be mad at the player, right? Because the game knows how to game, right? But players need to know the game better.
I've always told people it's a lot easier to learn how to handle a Ferrari after you've been driving it than it is to try and put turbo in a Corolla. Like the Corolla, that thing's kind of capped.
Right.
But you can always learn how to control that violence and everything like that.
And I think that's where learning intent at a young age is really important, right? I alluded to earlier that the only two things I've ever taught my kid, throw hard, swing hard, right? Building intent is way easier for me to teach kids how to control intent. I've always told people, if my oldest son gets to high school and the book on him is he throws about as hard as we've ever seen anybody throw at his age, he has no freaking clue where it's going, and I've done my job, right? Because I'll teach him how to control it. That's easy. But it's much more difficult the older you get to teach intent, because that's something that has to be rewired in our brains, versus when you're a young kid and you don't know any better, you just do it, right? And then eventually we can teach you the motor patterns to get you to control that violence.
And something that you mentioned earlier, your body is ever changing. So
Yes.
if you're teaching someone how to just place something and they're 10, that isn't necessarily going to translate when they become 11.
Fine motor skills don't really show up until post-puberty, right? When you get to start refining those motor skills. But like I said, your telemetry, I grew 5 inches between my sophomore and junior year of high school. I didn't know my ass from a hole of ground. I looked down at my shoelaces and go, holy shit, those still belong to me. Like, that's way the hell down there. I got to tie those. Like, that thing moves from up here. Like, that whole concept, like, you've got to realize that kids are, and they're going to grow at different rates. Now, puberty is the great equalizer. The best 9 or 10-year-old might be an average middle of the road 13, 14-year-old. And the worst 9 or 10-year-old might be the best 14-year-old in the state, right? And it all changes, right? Where it looks like this at the lower levels, then you get to high school and it looks like this, right? And then once you get past high school, then you start to see the skill start to separate the men from the boys, right? And that's where all of that, leading up to it, that's where all of that comes into play.
Something earlier that we talked about, we said that the ignorance aspect of wanting to play so many games rather than the idea of training. Do you think that might be from how many coaches we have, how many different teams we have, and parents, when they go to the practice, they see a majority of how these practices or training by these private instructors are being held? You and I know most of the time when we go to some 13U practice, or there are some instructors in this state that when you show up to something, it doesn't look what it's supposed to be.
Well, I think that's non-baseball people trying to be baseball people, right? And then you alluded to it, or I guess you asked the question earlier about too many coaches. Like, anybody can be a coach or call himself a coach, right? I organized a team of individuals, and now we're at the baseball field. Well, now what do we do, right? Well, I saw this guy on YouTube do a bunch of this stuff, so that's what we're going to do, right? And then, parent played. The coach goes, well, it's $3,000 to play on the team. So parent shells out $3,000, then they go to practice, and Coach YouTube's out there, and they go, what the hell is this shit? I didn't pay for this. Like I paid for a professional, this, that, or the other, right? And that's where anybody can be a coach, right? But not everybody knows baseball. Not everybody knows how to develop baseball. Not everybody knows how to coach baseball or communicate it. So that's where, yes, there are too many coaches, right? There's not enough qualified individuals to educate, not enough coaches clinics. And then, I mean, we could have a whole other podcast about this,
Yes.
right? Coaches within the coaching realm can't agree on anything, right? And this is more of my deep thoughts, black and white, old school, new school. There's no gray area in here, right? The old school guys look at you and I and go, bunch of yokels, right? Those freaking technology, like we've been doing stuff for 100 years this way and it works, right? And we go, well, we've got technology that measures what you used to do. Yeah, some of it does work. We use those still, but the other pieces, those don't work. We've got better versions of them, right? And I feel like the old school guys look at you and I with disdain, right? They're like, those guys don't know shit. And then we look at them and go, hey, thanks for everything that you did up to this point. We appreciate it. But, we're going to take it from here. Like there's a little bit more of a respect from our end, being the new school guys, to what preceded us, right? You were able to accomplish so much great stuff without the use of technology, and it worked for 100 years. But now we've got ways to measure things. We've got ways to quantify things. We have science and data. We have studies. We've got plenty of examples, right? We keep all kinds of stats, new age metrics, right? And the old school guys look at all that stuff and go, that's a bunch of hooey, right? And that, we get into the debate all the time online. Oh, that guy's got a launch angle swing. We go, yeah? Let me tell you something here, sweetheart. Every ball that you hit has a launch angle to it. There's not a swing designed for quote unquote launch angle. Every batted ball has a launch angle. That's not a swing type. It is the result of a swing.
Even the ones
Every
in the
swing.
70s, they
Yes.
had launch angles.
Correct.
Just
100%.
didn't know what they were.
Yeah. But like they've misconstrued this idea that we have found that between a certain angle, right, between 20 and 35.
It looks like
Do you have
15 over there,
Uh-huh.
and 35 is going to be that.
Right. So there's ideal areas that we want to hit the ball, and we can train ourselves to hit balls in those areas more frequently, right? That is not a radical idea. It's not a swing type. It is training, just like you guys train to chop wood, right? Again, we can go into whole kinds. I'm just stirring the pot here. So
I love it.
yeah. So, but you know what I mean? Like old school, new school, right? And like I said, even within the coaching realm, we can't agree with each other. So when, Johnny Allstar's dad wants to coach a club and he doesn't know squat, who's he going to listen to? Well, if we're not putting information out there as coaches, you and I, or even old school guys, if we're not putting out coaches clinics and giving these guys resources, where are they going to go for their information? They go to YouTube. They go to social media, right? And who are the most prominent YouTuber and social media types? The guys who don't know squat, who teach the wrong things. They just got this huge following where
A-Rod. Who was that?
we can listen to the jackasses on TV all we want. All the guys who, A-Rod, Tome,
A-Rod's the
Chipper
one I
Jones, like all those fools who think like, oh, I swing down on the ball. I'm like, you know what? You hit 500 plus home runs in your career, all of you. Nobody was swinging down on a damn ball. I'm sorry. You didn't swing down. I promise you. I'll go back and pull video. Now, real versus feel, right? We can get into that discussion. That's a hitting discussion. I don't get into that world. I'm a bunter. That's it. I know what I don't know, right? But again, that's where going to get those amateur coaches to get them educated is a giant missing piece of the puzzle. Because there's a lot of guys who want to be coaches, but there's not a lot of guys who can coach.
So for, let's say, one of those coaches that wants to do, because I feel like there's so much.
I know, just checking.
Gotcha.
Okay.
You're going to like this transition.
Yes.
I know that there's a lot
We
of
might have to do a part
coaches
2.
that I think they want to help so badly, they just don't know how.
Sure.
So for someone that has, the want to put out this information.
Mm-hmm.
Former big leaguer, okay? A facility that literally is doing everything that they humanly can to make sure that once you walk into this building, you technically don't have to leave.
Right.
Where can a coach like that find information from you guys, Fast Baseball, Fast Performance? Where can they get the information that they need to be reading and need to be understanding?
Sure. I mean, you can just start by asking us, you know, who are your influences, or, you know,
Where can they ask?
where, go to our website, right? Go to fastcolorado.com. I see your plug there, right? Fast Baseball on Instagram. DM us, right? My DMs are open. You can slide into them. But fastcolorado.com, we've got a contact page on there. Come into the facility, say hi, shake some hands, kiss some babies, you know, take some pictures, you know, put us out on social media too. That's an awesome place. But, you know, there's a lot of great resources. And what I always tell people is this. I'm a pitching guy, right? Go to Alan Jager's website, jagersports.com, and follow the rabbit from there. Like, that's how I started, right? Jager's one of my mentors. He's a great friend. I'd call him up right now. We'd have a great conversation, much like we've had tonight. And very, very similar topics, right? But, you know, when I had questions about the sport, I went to Alan. Like, I had questions, like, I had an athlete go, hey, coach, what do you know about weighted baseballs? It's like, fuck, I don't know. They scare me. And then he'd come back a week later. Hey, coach, what do you know about weighted baseballs? I'm like, fuck, all right. I'll call Alan. I call Alan. Alan goes, tell you what, talk to my boy Kyle up in Seattle. He runs this place called Driveline. I was like, all right. So I ended up calling Kyle, ended up talking with Kyle and Mike Rathwell, their CEO, for like 45 minutes. I said, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting stuff. You know, I went back and read through all their research that they had posted. We have blogs, right? So I went to the Driveline blog, Fast Colorado. We have a blog page. You can go read our blogs there. You may not like the topics, but you should read them. So I read through all their blogs, and I said, you know what? I like this. This sounds pretty cool, but I need to know what it feels like. So I put myself through the program. That's how I start, right? Then after reading Kyle's stuff, following him on social media, and reading Jager's stuff, following him on social media, that led me to the baseball ranch in Texas. Now I'm starting to learn about, you know, what is Ron Wolforth teaching, right? And then Ron Wolforth has a buddy down in Florida that was running the Armory at the time, and now it's Florida Baseball Ranch, right? So I'm like, all right, what do they know, right? And then where does that lead me? Well, that led me up to Connecticut and AB Athletics and Austin Wasserman and high-level throwing. I was like, all right, sweet. Ooh, I like that, right? And then I go to Florida. Ooh, I like that. And Texas guy, I'm like, ooh, I like that. Like Driveline guys, like, ooh, I like that, right? And obviously the Jager guys, I'm like, of course I like that, right? And so we started looking at all these things and going, all right, how do we develop fast performance, or fast baseball at the time? Well, Jason Hirsch Pitching Academy at the time, right? How do we take all of these pieces and make our own program? And that's where we started, right? I said, all right, I believe in arm care. We're doing arm care. Jager bands are the core of our arm care program. Said, let's do weighted balls, right? It's great for warming up. It's great for building strength and reinforcing good movement patterns. Boom, right? Now I've got throwing problems. Well, shoot, I need that connection ball. Got a connection ball. Boom, now I'm inside 90. Now I don't have an inverted W anymore. Thank you, Baseball Ranch, right? Then with our youth athletes, like I can't teach them plyo care drills because they don't know the movements, but I go up to Austin Wasserman and I got this great overhead throwing drill. It's like, perfect. Put that in the program. Like, we started plug and play, right? And so, you know, if you said, what is Fast Baseball's program? I would tell you, Fast Baseball's program is a combination of a bunch of different thoughts, right? I started chasing the rabbit, and that's where it led me, right? Do we have heavy influences? Absolutely, right? Jager, Driveline are massive influences on what we do, right? But what we do is pieces of what I think are some of the best in the industry that are doing it at very high levels, right? If you talk about, like, even our med ball stuff, where does my med ball stuff come from? Well, there's a guy named Eric Cressy who's like the best weight trainer for baseball players in the freaking world and has a ton of free content on his website. Go use those resources. Like, there's, in my mind, the people who do it the best don't hide their work. It's not behind a paywall. It's out in the open. Driveline is all out in the open, right? Jager, out in the open. Eric Cressy, out in the open. Now, you want to go train at those places, you got to pay, right? And some of them you got to pay very handsomely, right, for their knowledge. But they put a ton of resources out there for free. Utilize those. Don't go to, you know, Jim Bob on, or get your, who's that guy? Who's the hitting guy on YouTube? That's hilarious.
Oh,
Not
Domingo
no,
Alves?
not Domingo. The other one.
Uh,
He was talking about like pumping the or fanning the flames and
I don't know.
hitting bombs and why can't I think of his name? Murphy.
Oh, Kent Murphy.
Kent Murphy, yeah. Like if your coaching philosophy is a combination of Domingo Ayala and Kent Murphy, we've got problems. We've got big problems, right? But that's what I mean. Like there's good resources and bad resources. And if you're not in the know, then how are you supposed to know that, you know, this guy on this page or website or YouTube channel or whatever, he's not the right guy, right? And you guys have hitting resources, much like I've got pitching resources. I'm sure you've done some driveline stuff, or you've looked at Coach Lyle, or a lot of guys on Twitter. I think there's more hitting guys on Twitter than there are pitching guys. Pitching Twitter is an ugly space, but you know what I mean? Like you have your resources, we have our resources, and maybe there's something where we just need to pool our resources and be like, hey, listen, if you want the right information, go to these guys, right? And again, I've always been a firm believer. It's behind a paywall. It's probably not good information, right? They're just trying to monetize you, right? And to give you whatever that knowledge is. Like, I guess I haven't name called anybody yet, but I'm going to do it right now. As I was going through that process, Lance Wheeler was a very big influence on a lot of those guys. Like Lance and Alan knew each other, and Kyle at the Driveline, like they all kind of knew each other. And then they're like, oh, this guy Lance is amazing. And I started like going through Lance's stuff, and I'm like, all right, like I see, he was using he's the core velocity belt guy, right?
Oh, okay.
And he's in Tennessee or Nashville. And I started like reading through some stuff, but it's like I just felt like I was getting a sales pitch every single time. Like I was trying to look for more, and I never really found it. Finally, one day he was selling one of his training manuals, and I was like, $50. I was like, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm just going to buy this thing. I want to see what's in here. And I got done reading it, and it was like, I don't know, 15, 20 pages long, not super big, right? But I got done reading it, and I went, I didn't learn a damn thing. Like just the way he presents information, it just leaves me with more questions than answers, and it doesn't really give me anything that I can hold on to, right? And some people he communicates really well with, and maybe it's more of a high level discussion than my brain's capable of understanding, which is fine. I'm very happy to be at a lower level, but when I do Jaeger stuff, it's logical, it makes sense. When I read through Driveline stuff, it's logical, it makes sense. I get through Lance's stuff, and I'm just like, what the hell did I just read? Like I read a bunch of questions in philosophy, and I just don't feel like I got any baseball knowledge. So like I said, if you're a coach and you're doing things and it just doesn't make sense to you, it may not be the right thing for you, right? But it's another part where we can be really complicated in the way we teach things, right? There's terminologies, and I think the way it gets presented to coaches, we have to speak to coaches like they are 5, 6-year-olds, right? We've got to break it down super simple for them so that they understand what we're trying to do instead. And this is my big gripe with the strength and conditioning industry. It's like, well, we're going to talk about these movement patterns or types, but we're going to use very technical medical jargon. Talk about sagittal planes and like weird thing. And I'm like, well, hold on, let me get my phone out. Let me look up Google. What is a sagittal plane? Like, oh, why did he just say forward to backwards? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean. Like, we can be very complicated in things that we talk about, right? Maybe it's a launch angle swing, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, maybe we should just tell you, hit the shit out of the ball. Oh, yeah, that makes total sense. We could do that. You know what I mean? Like, so I think we can be so lost in what we're doing because we're in that world that we forget that, Johnny All-Star's dad is not in that world, and that if I overcomplicate things, he is just going to run the other way. But if I can keep it super simple, then he'll buy into it, and then I can start to hit him with more of that advanced stuff. So it's almost like, there's a book by Gary Vaynerchuk called Jab, 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 Right Hook, right? Where it was like trickle some information, get their attention, right? Once you've got their attention, boom, hit him with that. Like, same thing with coaching, right? I'm going to give you a little bit, I'm going to give you a little bit, give you a little bit. Now you're in it. Great. Boom, here's the rest, right? So that's where I think where we lose coaches or we need to be better with coaches is going that route.
I love that. I love that. And for anyone watching back home, if you're not too sure, he mentioned it earlier, where you can go to find this information.
FastColorado.com. No wwws, just FastColorado.com. Just type it in your search bar. You'll show up at the right place, I promise.
We're not about W's, whether they're inverted or whatever it is.
I mean, I like W's from a pitching standpoint, but win-loss record is way overrated. So, I mean, it is what it is.
I think that will be a great starting point for part 2.
We could talk about that.
Oh,
I'm learning a lot about it, too. I'm reading the MVP machine right now, and it's like...
And I'm going to come out of the woodworks.
Did you read that yet?
Doesn't matter. No.
You should, because the very beginning they talk about player development and some of its origins. You'd get a kick out of it.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they talk about, I think it was, I have to go back and look, but I think it was Wrigley, the owner of the Cubs. I think it was Wrigley. Maybe it was Kansas City Royals. Either way, this was back in like the 60s, 50s. They had player development. They were actually had sensors on a bat, and they were measuring attack angles, swing types, and like recording all of this data. And then the next team or whatever, the next ownership group came in and goes, this is a whole bunch of garbage, and they literally destroyed everything. So everything that we think we're doing that's pioneering the game was done 60 years ago by Major League Baseball, and we have no record of it. It's incredible. You should read the book.
I'm not a reader, but shoot, I'm going to have to put on my...
I'm not either. I try and knock out like 10 pages a night before I go to bed. And, I mean, it's easy to digest because it's in small chapters with small stories about certain individuals. It talks about Justin Turner and how he retooled his swing. It talks about Trevor Bauer and how weird he is. But it also talks about very non-traditional baseball guys making a massive impact in Major League Baseball. Guys who have no playing experience whatsoever beyond high school having a huge impact on the game right now.
I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah.
I really can. Well,
for next time.
Next time.
Yeah.
Jason,
tell you what, we'll both read it and we'll do a book report.
Hey, I'm not opposed to getting a book club together. I'm not opposed to it at all.
I'm not a big reader. I'm sorry, I don't want to admit it on camera, but I'm not a big reader. But I will read things that really interest me, and this so far has got me captured.
I'll tell you what, I think I read one book throughout my academic. Shout out to Spark Notes.
Yes, I was going to say a lot of Cliff Notes. I had Cliff Notes when I was in high school.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah,
Jason,
I was really good at bullshitting too.
I appreciate you coming on,
Yeah.
man. Thank you so much. For anyone back home, thank you guys for tuning in, and have a great rest of your Sunday. Stay tuned. Here in a little bit, going to do a Hit Chat Chit Chat. We have JP Fashone coming, Connor Burns, Steven Pacadern,